Very good evening to all of you. Before we commence, I'll be very grateful if you could kindly put your cell phones on silent mode or switch them off. Thank you. So very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. There is so much of fear in the city right now where COVID is concerned, but nevertheless, thank you for coming, and we're going to have a very riveting discussion on the book that is going to be shortly launched, Beyond Me Too, written by Tanushree Ghosh. So before I hand over to our moderator this evening, Oindrila Dutt, I will quickly introduce our very eminent panelists and the author this evening. So I start with the author, Tanushree Ghosh. She's a management professional in the technology sector, has a background in science and engineering. She has a PhD from Cornell University. She's also graduated from IIT Kanpur and Presidency College, Kolkata. Tanushree is also a social activist and writer. Her blog posts, op-eds, poems and stories are in effort to provoke thoughts, especially towards issues concerning women and social justice. She is a contributor, past and present, to several popular publications, including the Huffington Post US, where she authored many successful op-eds on gender, Syria war, the Western media's coverage of the Brazil Olympics, and so on. The Logical Indian, Youth Ki Awaaz, Tribune India, Women's Web, Thrive Global, and Cafe Decennis, where she hosted her own segment on social satire titled Blacklight. Her literary resume includes poems and stories featured in national and international magazines such as Words, Pauses and Noises UK, Tuck, Glimmer, Train Honourable Mention, as well as inclusion in 9 anthologies such as Defiant Dreams and the Best Asian Short Stories 2017, published out of Singapore by Kitab. Her first single author work, From Another Land, Redomania Publishing India, was featured in NPR USA. Tanushree's second single author work, Beyond Me Too, is being launched this evening. She is the founder and director of Her Rights, a non-profit committed to furthering the cause of gender equality. She frequently speaks on human rights, social justice, advancement and diversity, and inclusion in corporate and non-profit panels. She has been featured on several international podcasts, including the prestigious Women in Manufacturing from Jacket India, and in the fall 2021 Diversity Woman Magazine Power 100 list of 100 extraordinary women. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tanushree Ghosh. Could you please felicitate her? She's the author. Thank you, Tanushree. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm so proud and privileged to she needs no introduction, of course, in Calcutta, but I'm so proud to introduce our moderator this evening, Oindrila Dutt, who is an arts and events curator and presenter, having presented events at heritage venues such as the Raj Bhavan, Princep Memorial, the Laskar Monument, Town Hall, etc. Oindrila has worked with renowned artists such as Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, Amitabh Bachchan, Usha Uttup, Malika Sarabhai, Bikram Ghosh, Pandit Balmurli Krishna, the late Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra, Shubha Mudgal, Lilette Dubey, and many more. Directed Sonia Lumiere at leading heritage sites such as Victoria Memorial. Oindula has been a broadcaster and a moderator who has interacted with the late Yash Chopra, Mahesh Bhupati, Jaya Bachchan, Malika Sarabhai, Shobha De, Smriti Irani and others. She is also a freelance writer, having written a book on the Kolkata police columns for leading dailies such as the Telegraph and the Times of India, and articles for a variety of publications. Oindula is associated with a number of NGOs such as the Indian Institute of Cerebral Palsy and the Calcutta Samaritans. She has her own organization named as Open Doors. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a big round of applause, and thank you so much, Oindula, for moderating this session. Another wonderful writer and speaker this evening, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce Ruma Chakraborty. She's a senior English faculty in a premium institution in Kolkata. Teaching is both a profession and a vocation for Ms. Chakraborty. It is but one of the hats donned by her. A painter, a budding poet and compulsive storyteller, currently she is in the process of writing a compendium of short stories and poems. An alumna of Loreto School, St. Xavier's College and Calcutta University, an intrepid traveller, a typical Bangali in matters of food. An example of the argumentative Indian, an inquisitive learner to boot, she is a quintessential Renaissance woman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ruma Chakraborty.
And she verifies voice.
Okay.
Very important.
Our final panelist, ladies and gentlemen, a multi-talented lady, Antara Banerjee. She's a marketing, communication and branding specialist. She's also an award-winning author of the books The Goddess in Flesh and To Be a Woman, and a trilingual poet with the book Pieces of a Tormented Mind, to her credit. Her works are featured in anthologies like The Kali Project, Peacocks in a Dream, Freedom Raga, Macabre Tales, Chrysanthemum Chronicles, to name a few. Antara is the chairperson communications at Rakshak Foundation and an active commentator on social issues and women's issues. She is council member, India-Canada Bilateral Business Council, WICI. She has also been a speaker at prestigious forums like the Kala Ghoda, the AKLF, the TIE, the Rakshak Debates, Women's Economic Forum, Bhavanipur Educational Society Literature Events, Gorky Southern Literary Events, the E3 Energy Convention and such. She has also conducted various discussions and debates in various fora. Antara has a master's from Goldsmith College, London and a graduate from Presidency College. She is the recipient of the Sanmark Aparajita Award 2019, the Young Achiever Literature and Udan Empowering Woman Awards 2017 for her contribution in women-centric literature, among many other awards and recognitions conferred on her. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Antara. The moment has arrived. I would request everybody on the panel to kindly launch Beyond Me Too formally. Thank you so much again, ladies and gentlemen. Oindula now takes over. Thank you so much.
Check. Thank you so much, Mona.
And I just want to say one thing. I want to add one thing to all that she said about me, which is embarrassing. But one thing that qualifies me to be on the panel today is that I do serve on some posh committees. And unlike Tanusree's disappointment with what normally happens, I'll just tell you one case. This was the Calcutta Stock Exchange, and I was sitting on the committee that was hearing a case of assault and molestation against the chief executive, and he did get convicted. He got thrown out. So it doesn't always happen that women also find opportunities to stand up for men. I certainly don't. Maybe that's why they shouldn't be on committees. The other one where that happened was CCNFC, the Calcutta Cricket and Football Club. So yeah, I think a lot of women, I shouldn't say that they're more supportive of women, but they want to dig into the facts. They want to see that justice is done, and I hope that's going to happen. I do sit on a corporate posh committee also. Me Too started actually being used almost, I think, about 10 years before the accusations against Harvey Weinstein exploded. And that's really what started the worldwide phenomenon, the revolution, the landslide, which brought down hundreds of powerful men. So, Tanushree, what made you write about this? Number one, was it something personal? Was it people who were affected? Examine it in such detail. And also, broadly, not detailed, what are the major developments that this has spawned?
Sure. So I hope I am audible to everyone. What caused me to write about this book was really not as revolutionary as it might seem. After my first book, there is an agent who asked me to write on 498A. And what he wanted me to write on really was that 498A is causing a lot of issues for men, and that should be eliminated. So I started doing research on it. Now we have a personal story. In my own family, there was a...
I just have a request. You know, when you're mentioning acronyms...
yeah. Sure.
Just for the sake of everybody.
Sure. So 498A is the law against dowry that was brought in, and that's basically, initially it was a little bit draconian in the sense that given the extent of violence against domestic violence against women, it was non-bailable offense, and it was basically something in which you would be definitely prosecuted, and the social prosecution aspect of it was much higher than necessarily the legal prosecution. Now in my own family, I did have a case where my own uncle was abused because of that law. However, when I researched into it, I dove into a lot of Flavia Agnes's work, I realized that statistically, still the importance of law is more than the harm it causes. So I told the agent that I'm sorry, I cannot write this book. However, because I had started reading a lot of the feminist movements in India, and I have a non-profit for which I thought it would be very valuable to learn more. And in 2019, I worked for Intel. I was working in Bangalore in the technology sector. And when I was talking to women, I found that their excitement about Me Too in India, or what it can do, is much less than what I see in corporate segments in US. And these were very similar kind of a demographic, and the only differentiation was the nation. So that got me very curious, and I started thinking about, if there is a socio-cultural movement, why is it that a few nations like US and UK believe it can bring long-lasting change, while in India, where it's a more of a pervasive problem, there is no hope around it. So that got me curious. I started reading, and I got back to the agency and I said, I can't write that book, but I can write this book if you'd like. So that is how it started, and from there this ended up happening.
Antara, in India, the effects of Me Too caught up in 2018, a year after. Well, actually, it was with Jyoti Pandey, right? What was her name?
Nirbhaya is 2012 with Jyoti Pandey.
Jyoti Pandey, yeah. That was in 2012. That really was India's initiation into the Me Too movement. And an entire nation was shocked, shaken up. They were horrified by what had happened. But this had been a festering problem, sexual assault, the way women were treated. And that also started a culture or counterbalance that women deserve the dignity of choice, they deserve equality. So how did you think that impacted? Do you remember that? How powerful do you think that movement was and effective?
Thank you, Anuradi, for the question. I think Nirbhaya case is very unique because that is when India started talking about rape publicly and loudly. So that was a point from where we started talking. I mean, there was a public discourse on rape. Otherwise, it was all a hush-hush thing. Even the victim's family would say, just keep a low profile and let this will pass. So it was that kind of a culture from where we started talking about rape. And after that, when the Me Too thing also, I mean, took a little bit more speed, a little bit more stronger, it became stronger. Vintananda accused Alok Kumar. And all these, when it reaches the entertainment industry, then it becomes bigger.
You have Tanushree Doctor.
Yes, Tanushree Doctor, etc. So yeah, so that all helped to raise this issue up and to bring it to the fore. And it's not just a feminist issue.
Yes.
It's a social problem. Yes.
And thanks, Santara. One of the things I asked you was what were the developments. I think the most important development was that women used to be so frightened that we are going to get trolled, we are going to get criticized, but the Me Too movement gave them the courage to speak out, never mind what the criticism was, and give courage to a whole lot of other women who were in that position. Okay, Ruma, you're a teacher. So I want to ask you that what does it take to teach women to respect themselves, that they are worthy of respect, that they must know and go by their rights. They have a right to what is due to them. And to teach them that do not have any guilt, about to eliminate that guilt over what is perpetrated on them by others against their will. And men also, I want to say here, there's this, I'll come more to that later on, etc. They think that protecting women, I won't let my sister go to a party. I don't want women to come on a night shift. You are also exercising an unfair control. That is also not right. So for women to be really equal, you need to have equal rights. You need to have the right to earn a living, to be self-sufficient. You need to have the same opportunities, education, and rights as men. And most of all, you need to have the right to say no. So how do you teach women that?
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
That's a very pertinent question because this is something that as a teacher we come across. Parents would love to perhaps protect their children. They would love their children to not fall into trouble. They'd expect the school and the schooling system to corroborate what they say, their point of view. But unfortunately, I think the idea that children are also, young girls who are growing up to be young ladies, they can't always be wrapped up in cotton wool and kept hidden away. They are people. They ought to be treated like that. Rather than covering up the girl or not letting her go out at night, I think it's a much better idea when, the parent teaches them that it might be a little difficult out there and they have to educate their sons. You see, the problem with the education system that wants to protect honor, purity, associates shame with the body, that kind of an education is never going to ever change this conspiracy of silence that surrounds abuse. I think it's not the legality of the abuse that's of getting judgment for the abuse that is at risk here. What I think is and I think Tanushree's book does go a very long way in changing that climate of silence. That one thing can change it from perhaps girls not being open to speak up to opening up and speaking about things that are happening to them. I think ultimately that is the most important thing, that we have to shatter the conspiracy of silence.
Social silence.
It is, because education after all is a sociological tool. So what we are trying as teachers, perhaps as educationists, that we are trying to eradicate that desire or that subjugation of society in perpetrating that conspiracy of silence. If that is done away with, if, as Andra said very correctly, if we can speak, today we are in front of an eclectic audience. We have all manner and age group of people sitting here, all kinds of people sitting here. And we are talking about ma'am talked about being part of POSH, which is prevention from sexual harassment. Harassment podium. The government of India has created that. We have Vishaka guidelines. But those are on paper.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, being able to implement it in real life, which is sociological. That's where I think as a teacher I come in. And this is where I suppose all of us have a very cut out job of being able to at least talk about it without batting an eyelid, without not feeling shame, without being subjected to the stares, as they're called. A girl child should be able to stand up and say that she's been abused or she's in the process of being abused or somebody's trying to manhandle her, and the mother should be able to hear it out and say, ऐसी बातें नहीं करते, अच्छी घर की लड़कियां ऐसी बातें नहीं करती, मत बात करो ऐसी. Don't talk about it.
But that frequently happens.
It does.
And the sad thing is, this I haven't read in your book, but this is a statistic, especially in rural areas. Mothers who are probably aware that that girl is right when she says the father is molesting her or assaulting her, they want to hang on to their man, their marriage, so that mother keeps quiet and this child suffers.
Also, Anjali, I think it's not only holding on to her marriage. She thinks of it as a rite of passage. That every girl has gone through this rite of passage. Every woman at some point of time in her life has been abused, has been manhandled, has been mistreated, has faced some kind of an abuse. So what's the new thing? I mean, that's something that Tanushree talks about it also in her book.
Thanks so much, Ruma. That rite of passage is so true, because a lot of women think that I suffered. Let us suffer. It's as cold-blooded as that. I also want to pick on two things you said, education and the silence and changing. In 19th century India, it was mostly Bengal. It was upper class elite. You use the term eclectic. It was the elitist, educated upper class men, Hindu men, who were fighting for women's rights, most of all. And you mentioned this somewhere in your book. And that gradually eroded because it passed away the power from their hands to the more egalitarian middle class, who didn't really have that kind of forward-thinking education. Okay, you also mentioned that women involved in schemes. Now, there was this case in 1992, and I'm asking Tanushree this, Bhavni Devi. She was a woman in a village in Rajasthan who protested against the marriage of a 9-month-old baby girl. And because she stuck to her guns, her conviction, what she knew to be right, what she was doing, she was raped by 5 Gujjar men, upper caste men. She was a low caste woman. Now, she became a celebrated name worldwide. But till date, she waits for justice. It's 28 years. And 4 of the accused have died. And there were ridiculous reasons given for not convicting those men. That surely, uncle and nephew, when a relative is present, they wouldn't both be perpetrating that sort of a crime, etc. And one of the things that stand out horrifically in my consciousness, and you've mentioned that over and over again, is the fact that when she went to lodge a complaint, she was sent home without a skirt. She was told that this is needed for evidence, and of course, the evidence was later tampered with and destroyed. So, Tanushree, you have said over and over again, you've talked about the caste implication in sexual oppression of women. You've talked about this so-called honor, and you've talked about the consequences faced by women who stand up, who dare to speak out. Just tell us briefly about that, and how can we change that?
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer answer. I apologize for that, because I do want to touch upon the caste or the class or race in US, for example. Now see, the thing that I realized both in my activism and studying for this group is approximately half of the world's population is women, but gender is a very difficult cause to unite behind. And that is one of the main reasons why India has seen movements again and again. In the 80s, there was the Mathura custodial rape case, which was like before Nirbhaya. It has seen Bhabri Devi. What ends up happening is other identities become more unifying than the gender identity. Now, today there is a lot of discussion on intersectionality. It is extremely important to be intersectional and having that lens that, look, your experience as a upper caste Hindu woman in India, or an urban woman in India, or a white woman in US versus a woman of color is not going to be equivalent. But I personally feel the issue is that we lose the unifying statement of gender. And what happens is women turns against each other, unifying against the cause of whatever else is there. I will give a quick example. I was in a journalism cohort for empowering women, where I was in a way a leadership ambassador as a teaching. And this is right after the George Floyd issue in women. So it's a very sensitized issue in US. It's a very sensitized climate. So some white women are giving a statement on why women's empowerment is very important. Now, the women in the room who were mixed, like they were white, they were Latino women, they were Asian women, they were black women, they got extremely mad at the white women. And what they started saying is, who are you to talk about this? You have experienced gender issues much less than I have. And you don't have to face the same kind of scrutiny when I go into a store. So in a minute, I could see that the enemy is now within the room. You will see that in historical research in British India, they found these committees of Indian women, and suddenly it's Hindu women versus Muslim women. Suddenly it's upper caste women versus lower caste women. So this, I think, has caused terrible damage to the cause of gender, because across every nation, and I have provided a lot of case studies of many nations, from Japan to US to Latin America, the problem statements are similar, but we don't unify behind them because we identify with something else much stronger. Gender is almost like, this light kind of cloud over your identity. Everything else you have becomes stronger. So then you can't unite behind it, right? So that's the.
I just want to come in here once. You mentioned this case of the woman in Bangalore who was raped and murdered, and people went, because she was educated, elitist, people went after those suspects. They were killed in an encounter. Whereas Hathras, Unnao, whatever, that is definitely not going to get solved.
Yeah, so my answer to your question is, a caste lens is very important. But when you are using that caste lens, the gender lens should not be lost. That's my first point. And the second is, I believe you asked about some women speaking up and facing. So this is actually, I have tremendous respect for, the foreword here is by Dr. Pritam Pak. So she was the director of the Women's and Child Development, and she was with Bhabri Devi. I spoke to her just 2 months back. and the amount of struggle they face in every day, even for standing by Bhavri Devi. And even Bhavri Devi is world famous for what she did, but her daily life is, she is socially ostracized. Via Dr. Pritam Pal, I got to know that her own children don't want to talk to her.
And her own caste turned against her.
Her own caste is against her. Her children don't want to talk to her. And the social conditioning is such that they do really believe she did something wrong by going against the honor of the village.
It's engendered.
Right. So that's where movements are very powerful, because there is a lot of power in number. So a precedence needs to be set, and that precedence slowly starts building more around it. And that's why, even if Me Too dies in India or another movement comes or not, India does not have any lack of laws. Many people think we do. We don't. Actually, even Ghosh, and I researched this, and you have interviews of lawyers, is one of the most strongest sexual harassment at workplace laws compared to most of the Western nations. So it's not a problem of law. It's a problem of
those who are enforcing the law.
Yes, because of the mindset, because of the broader cultural mindset around it.
And I just wanted to bring this up, or we'll come to it later. The way they questioned, what the police tell them, etc. I'll come to that later. I wanted to ask you, Ruma, women are very often the worst enemies that other women have. They're so quick to judge, to condemn, and to fall into that patriarchal conditioning, that mindset. Now, what is it that we need to do to get them out of that mindset? One, you have the dowry deaths, you have women condemning other women just for being different, or condemning a woman for having a professional career. You don't look after your home, your child is going to the dogs, anything that goes wrong, it's your fault. And not just that, how and why do they condition, should they condition their sons? You mentioned that. To be more sensitive, to understand that women are due respect and equality. I just want to say that if you go into the standard lower middle class or lower class home, actually not lower class so much. They're becoming far more progressive than the middle class and the educated. And there is a certain limited amount of funds. It's going to be said that this is for my son to go to school, not the girl. So I think Tanushree and all that, they're wonderful schemes, incentives to make people study the girl child. But there's a larger piece of fish and a smaller piece. A mother will say that will go to the son. Sorry. The son may not have it in him to be academically excel. But so what is it that we need to do for that?
When I was reading Tanushree's book, the first thing that struck me right at the beginning of the book is when she talks about who's a valid victim. It almost sounds like an oxymoron, don't you think so? Valid victim. Validity is used for a lot of other things, but definitely not with the word victim. So that's when she also goes on to explain, when she's talking about the valid victim, she goes on to explain something called soft patriarchy. And it hit home. It resonated with me, because let's face it, even I've been guilty of it. I'll give an example. We all know about the Park Street rape case, right? We are on Park Street. It just happened across the corner in Russell Street. The woman was out at night at 1:30. She just had a drink with a man. She was wearing a short skirt. Now, how many of you, truthfully, please tell me, did not in your minds for a couple of seconds at least think, what was she doing out at 1:30 at night?
And how stupid of her.
It's very stupid of her. What is she doing wearing a short skirt, going out to a bar, drinking beer with a man? Of course she's giving him the come hither look, or the come hither signal. That makes her a valid victim. What about consent? And of course the fact that you thought about it in that way makes you a soft patriarchal person. The very fact that in your mind it was somewhat justified. her eventual fate of being raped was something to hone wala tha. You know, it's not when you hear something break out to you and you feel, good God, that's awful. I wonder if it's true. And then comes the next equation. If it is true, then it's horrible. But we don't never go to that point where we tell ourselves that if it does happen, it's horrible. We somehow tend to rationalize the act by saying that X, Y, and Z features were there present in order to lead to that fact. So we are being, we are actually endorsing soft patriarchy. And we, when I say we, I mean all of us, we are educated, we are liberal, we'd like to believe that we have very secular views regarding woman and her body and her right to do whatever she wants with her body. Also the fact that, we believe that we are raising our children well, we are raising them with the ideas that they are equal to men, and yet we tell them, and my daughter is in the room, I am guilty of having told her, but you can't go out at this time of the night, it's not safe. One part of you will tell me, but ma'am, you're right, it is not safe, so therefore it's okay for you as a mother to stop her from doing so. But why is it not safe? Because hello, we haven't taught our boys that it should be completely safe for a girl to do matar gashti, as they say in Hindi, at 12 o'clock in the night like you can. And I'm a teacher and I have students telling me, ma'am, why is it alright for my brother to come back home at 11:30 after a night out with his friends while I have to come back at 8:30 sharp from tuition? God help it if there's no conveyance available. If I have to take the public transport, I'll have my mother yelling at me for 45 minutes. Why did you take it? You'll be felt up. It's not good. What if you were groped? What would happen? Blah, blah, blah. So can you see, we're all part of the soft patriarchy. So till this climate is changed, nothing's happening.
You can only do that yourself.
You can only do that yourself.
And yeah, you wanted to say
No, I
something.
just wanted to add, I write about this in the book. When I realized that with all my so-called progressiveness, I do have a lot of soft patriarchy.
You said shame.
Yeah, I said shame on me is because when Tanushree Datta came out with her accusations, for a long time I did not pay any attention to it. And that's because who in my head I thought Tanushree Datta is. And that is very, very shameful. And it took me a lot of courage, I'm serious about, to admit this to myself.
Yeah.
That you are judging whether or not she has a right to be a victim. Now, I'm not making a statement on whether her accusations are true or not. However, I did not even pay attention to the story because of what I thought a right kind of a woman who would be a victim is.
Yeah.
And I think the first step is to recognize this in ourselves. Because many times I find a lot of folks who are very good-willing, they are trying to do the right thing. However, they don't realize that the small things they say or do actually is slowly building up this foundation. Right? So we just want to aware that.
Absolutely, bang on. Okay, I'm going to come to something which is a burning issue. Now, rape has always been an instrument of subjugation in war, in conflict, to beat women into shape, so to speak, to bring them, to make them fall in line with views. But other than that, there's a very important thing about religion, and I'm not going specific here. Anything. You look at Afghanistan, you look at, there's a chapter here, Bharat versus India, you look at ancient scriptures, what Manu has said, and the people who still follow it, not progressing with the times. So Andhra, I'm asking you that this is something really dangerous. And if it is allowed to progress, all of us, and that includes us, we may think that it won't ever hit us. It's already affected our lives in many ways. We should stop it from going further. So,
Anuladi, it is, I do not know if there is a solution right now, because if you see that all fascist regimes and presently a lot of countries which have right-wing governments, they are proactively allowing religion to take over the society, and the regressive ideas of religion, not the philosophy behind religion or the good things about religion, the regressive things, they are being skimmed out of religion and being propagated, and especially against women. Right now in the Dharma Sansad.
Always against women. Whether religious fanaticism and fundamentalism comes garbed in a cassock-clad in the form of a cassock-clad priest or a saffron-robed sadhu or a mullah.
Absolutely.
It's all unkind to women.
Yes, yes. And in the recent Dharma Sansad, the controversial one, some sadhu called Yati, I forgot his last name, he says that a Hindu woman who only has one son is a Nagin. So we should be the instruments of having more and more sons to fight for Hindutva. That is the message, and we know who is promoting Hindutva. It is the government. It is a systemic thing, and it is not only about India. It is everywhere. So I mean, even if you see in insurgency, women are raped and molested just
by the army.
The army, yes. The thing that Tanushree has said, that the things which are not talked about. I'm glad that you have talked about it, and so that we can talk about it. So these things, what do you call the virtue of a community is destroyed by destroying the shaming the women. I don't see the relation, but it is always related. It is in the vaginas of the women. If a woman in your family is raped, then your family name is shamed.
No, you must have done something to deserve it.
Yes, yes. If your brother has eloped with a high caste girl, then rape the sister.
You've written about it.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say slowly, just really quickly, is the behaviors you normalize in time of peace is exaggerated and exploited in time of conflict. So when you use certain things as tools to get people under control, very softly, very subtly, like you said, when there is a conflict, that is actually going to become the instrument. And that is, I have talked about the Rwandan genocide here, I have talked about many different conflicts. You are absolutely right, and actually it's not just Hindutva. For example, in US right now, Roe versus Wade is probably going to get reversed. And that's basically for, that's the right to abortion. Until a proof of life is established. And primarily it's for rape and incest victims who should have the choice, but Catholic Church believes that that's against their religion.
You have a right to do what you want with your own body.
Also, the fact that, like Andhra said, very correctly, Andhra just said that, every kind of repository of culture now resides in the woman's body. So she thus becomes less of a person and more of a public or a social entity.
Especially for the upper class.
Especially for the upper class.
To be exploited.
To be exploited, yes, of course, within brackets. To be exploited. Also, when she talks about, all kinds of atrocities being perpetrated on women, because you see, they'll say, but that's because we exalt the woman as a mother. That is her great role in life, to be a mother, and therefore, all generations come out of her. And so therefore, if you are to keep her pure, only then is the purity of the race sanctified. Can you hear all those lovely words which are actually basically telling you something extremely atrocious? A woman has no right over her body. Then what does she have right over? Why is this issue being raised? People will ask. Because you see, feminism talks about a woman being a human being.
That you said. Yeah.
Simple. That's what Tanushree writes in her book.
And I just want to say that feminism, that also Tanushree has written about, the entire feminist movement people have tried to discredit it repeatedly in many ways. Feminist neglects the home, feminist cheap, feminist lesbian, feminist homebreaker. So a lot of things happen, and I have a question which I hope you're going to answer, or maybe we should ask the men here. Shush, are you here? Okay. Women become impure they are goddesses until they get raped or assaulted, in which case, or they have an illicit affair, or they just want somebody, in which case they should get punished. Now, women are meant to be covered because they generate some kind of desire, sexual desire. What does that make men? Animals.
Yes.
That you cannot control that desire or that impulse, and you have to jump on a woman who's clad in a body-hugging suit or something like that. Where are these basic questions ever raised?
Now,
Muslim countries, again, when they say that you're supposed to wear the burqa, what are you saying, that your men are animals?
yeah, one of the things that was very interesting to me is, why do people think this way? Recently in India, there was the debate on Kanyadan.
Yeah.
And people got all up in the arms about, hey, this is my heritage, this is my honor. Now, is it really? Now, I wanted to really look at it from a neutral perspective. What I found out was a lot of this gendering was actually designed fairly recently. It's not that Hinduism has perpetually put women in a certain place. It was designed very recently for certain goals of the society at this time. However, most people do not know that. It's the history is lost. And because the history being lost, what you actually believe to be your heritage is actually something that has been very recently designed by someone just like you. Now, one of the things that you asked about, what does it make men? This book actually goes into men's issue a lot.
Yeah, me
in
too
depth.
also. I mean, he
And-
too.
And I deliberately wanted to focus a lot on men's rights movement. As I said, I did a lot of research on 498A. I tried to look into the grievances, and I have presented some very, I hope, unbiased data on statistics on what is happening with men. I do not think that we are doing our men a great deal of service either. Because from a young age, you are teaching them that you cannot be weak, you cannot cry, your family's honors rely on you. If your sister wants, she might not work, but you will always have to work. You have to be the breadwinner. This creates an immense amount of pressure. And this also gives them this thought that, look, women are lesser because they are things, and then you have to control their well-being, so they are objects. So literally you are making them lesser objects. And this actually is extremely hard a position to be in. I meet a lot of men, I have interviewed a lot of men, they basically say is that, look, I actually do not know what to do. I am extremely afraid that I will be accused of something. I feel like I have all the responsibility in the family. I feel like if my wife wants, he or she has the choice without being socially judged to be a homemaker. If I get depressed, and I talked about the Sushant Singh Rajput case and a lot of things, most people will not believe me or will find me lesser for that. So, and this brings us to the other point of, why do we care about women's issue? I am saying that even if you take all the social goodness out of it, don't believe that all human beings are equal. It doesn't need to be a social cause. It's an economic problem. I have presented a lot of data that India's GDP, just by preventing the loss of women from the workforce and getting more women into the workforce, will actually increase multifold. And there is reports by organizations, both national and international, for countries like Brazil, Russia, India and China specifically. So we are doing so much to build our infrastructure because we want a better country, we want GDP. However, this is an easier problem to solve in a way if you accept that this is a problem. Most people don't understand it's an economic problem. Most of the sadhus you were talking about, or all the god men and all of that, they really feel like, I don't see them as human beings, so I don't care. My benefit is not in letting them rise. My benefit is in maintaining what I believe is my honor and my heritage.
Maybe also, and that's not something you've written about, that people, men, inherently want something to possess or control. They want to feel powerful. And who better than the weakest denominator, women?
Yeah, I don't feel, so there is another work I have presented, and I believe just yesterday Hindustan Times was asking me about this. this idea that men and women are inherently very different, so they have to have very different wants and asks and roles, probably is not right. I have presented a hypothesis which is by J.S. Hyde, and it's called gender similarity hypothesis. So I don't believe men inherently want to possess something. Most men are made to believe that they need to possess something, and they do not have an outlet of, being weak. They don't have a chance of being weak. They are made to believe that you are the stronger in this equation.
Yeah.
So that leads to this, if you are stronger, someone has to be weak. Right?
Taking off from that, Antara, I have a question for you. We see that powerful men, especially, it's very hard to convict them of a crime, sexual oppression or assault of any kind. And we've had Salman Khan, Larry Nassar, we've had Weinstein, and we had KPS Gill, Rupan Deol Bajaj. She was an IAS cadre person, and he was, of course, the KPS Gill, a hero who had beaten a lot of things into shape. And even when he died, he was convicted in a manner. He was indicted, even though he didn't serve a term. But when he died, it was still all, he was really lauded as a hero. And people said, oh, how unfortunate that this thing was brought against him. It was like they didn't want to accept this horrible, horrible blot on his character. So, is it power that makes you gloss over, makes society gloss over the shortcomings? What is at fault? Because social beliefs, silence, you said, and mores have a lot to do with the oppression of women.
Absolutely, Radhe. It is the priorities that we set. Nationalism is at the top, then your spirituality, religion and everything, and feminism and women's rights perhaps is the last priority. So if a woman's honor is harmed, can we talk about that? Rather we would talk about a national hero. So the glory is more there. So what? I mean, men will be men. So these are the quotes that float around. And hota hai yaar, aise hota hai. I mean, it's so normalized that when people become powerful, the शेरों को ज़रूरत होती है kind of that kind of
acceptance.
Yeah. I mean, why is it unfortunate for Gill? I fail to understand why is it unfortunate for Gill for what he did. I mean, it is unfortunate for the woman, but we still want to worship a hero who is tainted. It's fine, as long as he has done the other things well. Even M.J. Akbar, he was such a good writer. Somebody told me, but he was really talented. Somebody told me that. So what? If he was talented, but what he did was still wrong. What Aloknath did, whatever his image on the silver screen is, the loving father and then the bechara kind of the sanskari character. So it doesn't matter. I mean, if somebody has done something, I mean, that cannot move to the side just because he has done something else well. So I think
it applies not just to someone. I also think it applies to governments and states. For example, Rajasthan is a shining example for tourism, for forward movement. But look at its record where women are concerned. Female infanticide, child marriage.
The sex ratio.
Sex ratio.
888 women to 1,000 men.
It's horrific, but nobody wants to talk about that. Okay, I'm going to just ask, I think we've run out of time, but I want to ask, just touch upon two things. We talk about, you have talked about at length in your book, that when a woman does file a complaint, which is very rare, much more now than before maybe, but still rare. And unfortunately halfway through the case takes back the complaint. Why? One, because she's told, the police are in on this also. Look, you will not be able to fight these people. You are not going to be safe. The workplace tells you you will not get promoted. You may be chased out of work. You are really pressured. You're almost believing that you've done something wrong. So that still has not changed. With all these laws, regulations, we're still not being able to control that nexus, police and offender. That's one. And secondly, you know, when these things do come to court, do go to court, as you said, it's so difficult to prove. So very few convictions, which is disheartening for people. Because you live with a stigma, there are so many people who believe that you're the person who's done the wrong or deserved wrong to be done to you. So why?
First of all, it's extremely hard to prove something that can be subjective or semi-subjective. So, for example, if you look at the US sexual harassment law, it says it has to be gross or repetitive, right? So, how do you define something that is gross or something that is repetitive? And therefore, knowing something has happened and proving that it has happened are two entirely different things. So how do we change that? We change that, I believe, by setting precedents once at a time. The point you said about cases being taken back, so I have interviewed a lot of Rajasthan activists in this book, and I primarily focused on Rajasthan because I wanted to focus on one. I'm a scientist by profession, so data-wise, I wanted to focus on worst case and best case and draw the parallel, right? So the police are not wrongly advising. They're basically saying that, look, the amount of pain you will go through by going through this is not going to be worth the end result. And for most women, that is still true. So that is why it's extremely difficult, because it is the logical step to take. Very few people will say, I have a point to prove. So this is what I wanted to mention anyways. I feel women have a lot of responsibility in this. Long time back, I wrote a piece in Huffington Post US in which I talked about that I don't believe feminism gives women's right to not work. And I don't think that's a valid choice, because if you are asking for equal right, you need to have equal responsibilities. I got multiple emails from women, US, India, all over the world, saying that this is bullshit, you do not know anything about family life, this is a family's choice, all of that, right? So why is it important that you have your economic sustenance? Because economic independence is social power. It's extremely hard to take advantage of women who are empowered, and it's hard to take advantage of women around them. So I will end this with a story about my mother, who is actually sitting. Yes, so growing up, actually I had a lot of resentment against my mother, because everyone else will have their mothers outside the school with tiffin boxes lined up. They will have their mothers in the annual function. I never had them because she is a school teacher. She adamantly continued to work, and we were from a very affluent family. My father earned good money. My maternal grandparents' family were extremely rich. So one time, I still vividly remember, we took my sister to a doctor's office, and she had fever. And the doctor, basically, my mother said, she's always playing with water. And the doctor said, well, what do you expect will happen to kids of working parents? And he said in Bengali, he said, Nari স্বাধীনতা খুব ভালো জিনিস কিন্তু পরিবারগুলো নষ্ট হয়ে যাচ্ছে, which basically translates into women's independence is great but is destroying homes. So I was extremely mad at my mother. I came back and I told her, you are destroying our home. Why do you have to work? So what she said, and I was very young, I don't remember it verbatim, but the essence always stayed with me. She said that, look, if I stop being a mother, no one will take away the right of being a mother from you or any other woman who comes after you. But if I stop working, that might happen. So when we choose to work, when we choose to be independent, when we choose to be empowered, I think it's very important for women to remember that you are not making a statement just for your family. You are making a statement for your entire gender, you know.
I think
So
this
Yeah, this is in fact, I wanted to read that out. I had marked it. You know, I think that's wonderful. I just want to say two things quickly. That in India, especially, we worship women as goddesses, especially in the East. But the hard truth is that there is no, well, recently there have been some, but no women priests were allowed to do Durga Puja, and very few women priests still do conduct weddings. So it's all very well. Put the woman on a pedestal, lock up the key, put that in a glass box, lock up the key, throw it away. We don't want to fall into that trap. We'd much rather not be goddesses, be human beings who are equal. And I also want to read out one line that you've written, because there are a lot of similarities and comparisons between the US and India. Race over there, the color of the skin versus caste, etc., etc. No country in the world has successfully eliminated discrimination against women or has achieved full equality. We need to remember that even though we have a dismal record, India frequently comes in at 12 out of 120 something, etc. It's really depressing. But I think there's hope, there's a beginning, there's a start. And as long as we have people like Bhavri Devi and others who make a point, and we have people like Tanushree shining a torch on what is happening, I think there is hope for a better future for women and men, because you can't go forward just one gender without the other. So for all of you who haven't read it, please read it. It's not a simple breezy read through, but it's a very important book to read. It's very relevant. Please, please.
With a quote.
Please.
Not by Tanushree, but by Mohan Bhagwat.
Oh,
RSS.
that's
RSS
India
chief.
versus Bharat.
Yeah. And so we are sitting at the heart of Calcutta,
Unbelievable.
and in an urban setting. And this is what Mr. Bhagwat has to say. Such crimes hardly take place in Bharat, but they occur frequently in India. Go into villages, no gang rapes or sex crimes there. They are prevalent in urban areas. Spoken by Mohan Bhagwat, RSS Chief, 2013. We should leave here, this place, with anger in our head. We cannot just sit, quietly meditating and being spiritual and being zen or something. I mean, we have to have this anger in ourselves to why at all a person can talk like this. We should live with this thought in our mind.
I'd just like to add one line, and that is, she makes a very valid point. She says, when a woman expresses a point of view, often it comes to reflect her moral character. By token of that, Tanushree, our moderator Anjaladi, Antara and I are women of very fallen morals, because here we have some very strong convictions about sexual harassment and about women's roles. So on that very happy note, I'm very proud to be a woman of very suspective morals at this moment, because I have some very strong convictions and opinions. I think Tanushree's book is admirable because she at least allows us that space to be so. Thank you.
And now may it be so. Okay, quickly, just one question in case somebody has.
India happen to be the softest, target for by society's terms. So, do you think you have any thing to suggest for women out there to not probably be the softest target, and perhaps you can share a personal experience of you while you were rising into this persona? If you could give us some.
anytime I think or hear that you have a lot of courage, I actually think of these women who are actually in these police stations, who are fighting this day in and day night. I don't think I come from a very privileged position. So it's very hard to be an outspoken woman today in India because of the climate. Because there is nothing that can prevent you from being a target. But
It's very difficult to be in today's India an outspoken man or woman.
True,
period.
actually, outspoken men were women. Now, women obviously encourage some extra anger because of this belief that, hey, how dare you speak, right? And all these terms about prostitutes and all of that. Like, I have heard so many women quote those terms about. My tip is, first of all, be smart. It's extremely important for you to be alive and you to be free, for you to be an activist, right? So if you don't keep yourself, and we talk about this in corporate politics. Yeah, if I don't survive my job, I will not be able to help the people I want to help. So this is probably like, an unconventional tip, but you have to be smart. And then the second thing is, there will be a lot of targeting. So for example, again, many times I would write a piece and I will get letters, mostly from women, who would be like, I get a lot of encouraging letters also, a lot of supporting, but those ones, the ones I read a lot into is the ones that say Western media is paying you. They don't understand, writers don't earn money. so if Western media was really paying me, it would be a very different kind of a scenario. I would do a lot more for my non-profit and stuff. I don't think Western media even knows who I am, but you will get all of these things, and you will get a lot of things like, once I got a comment that said, you are a stupid cow. So I was very angry. I went and shouted on my husband for like 30 minutes that day. But the thing is that I gave some of the more civilized comments, right? You have to have conviction in what you are doing, because there is nothing that can protect you from being targeted if you decide to have an opinion. So you have to know, like, I have conviction. I have my own moral compass, which I'm going by, and you have to be very smart about it.
I'm going to end this, we have to, but I just want to say one thing we didn't have time to touch on, was this entire bit she's done on the He Too movement. And also that we tend to overlook the fact that sexual harassment, assaults, crimes are as prevalent against boys as they are against girls. So on that note, I'm going to end. It isn't all unequal, I promise you. Read the book, both men and women. It's important. Thank you so much. Mona, Shush, the Readers and Writers Club, putting this up.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you had an amazing time hearing these wonderful panelists and a very powerful author this evening. Thank you so much. A big thank you to Oindrila, to Tanushree, Antara, and to Ruma. Could you please give them a round of applause for this wonderful discussion that set us thinking this evening about the whole topic, which is firing up the world, literally. We read the newspaper every day, but how many of us actually sit back and think and do something about it? So thank you very much. Please join us for tea. The author is here to sign copies of the book, and have a wonderful evening. And thank you very much again for being here. And thank you to Oxford Bookstore and Sage Publications also. Thank you.
Thank you for all who braved the current.
Yes. So I thanked you for coming in spite of all the fear that's going around and all the COVID that's happening in almost every home. So thank you for trusting us and for being here this evening. Thank you.